Field Director of Our Revolution. Welcome to the Our Revolution Monday night call every Monday at 8:30 Eastern, 5:30 Pacific. We gather up, huddle up as a progressive movement. Members from across the country, speakers from across the country, we gather up and talk about the week ahead, the month ahead, the year ahead, how we're going to build progressive power across the country in our local communities, at the state level, and at the national level. So again, welcome to the Our Revolution National Call every Monday night. We gather again at 8:30 Eastern, 5:30 Pacific, and we'll begin this call here in 4 minutes. So at 8:30 Eastern, 5:30 Pacific, we'll get this call going. So I'm just gonna say hello to some people and just do a little bit of a warm up as we get the call going tonight. So we wanna make this a very interactive call. Want to make this a fun call. So please, if you're online, introduce yourself online. Let us know where you're calling in from tonight. And let's get the conversation going. We're normally joined by 300 to 400, 500 people on Zoom, plus a big national audience on social media and on the teletown hall. So we are excited about the road ahead, and we are gonna say hello to some folks. I see Christine from Portland. I see my good friend every Monday night, Bruce J. down in Broward County. I see Hal in Maryland. I see Dan in Texas, Eva from Cleveland. I gotta look at my camera a little bit. So I'm seeing Cindy from Our Wisconsin Revolution. Hey, Cindy, how's it going tonight up in Wisconsin? Seeing a lot of folks come in. Daniel from Columbus. John from Farmingdale, New York. Welcome, John, to the call. Cindy again. Vinnie Bacon, who's an Our Revolution former candidate in Fremont, California. Hey, Vinnie. Good to see you. Eva from Cleveland. We got Holly from Vermont. We got David, Our Revolution leader in Howard County, Maryland, just outside of Washington, D.C. I see Al in St. Louis, Paula in Burlington, Jim from Jersey, and Sherry from New York. So we're going to get going here in 2 minutes. Vinnie Bacon, all in for Pamela Price. Absolutely. Sherry, again, hello from New York. So tonight we have something we haven't done in a while. Tonight we have Ben Cohen from Ben and Jerry's joining us. Ben is we all love Ben and Jerry's ice cream. Not only is he a great ice cream maker, he's an author, an activist, and somebody who shares his time with us. So tonight, Ben is going to be talking about his new book. Please buy it tonight. I think the price is good. If you're a member, you get a movement builder of Our Revolution. You get 30% off. I think the way it works out, $10 for the e-edition and $13 for the paper edition. And, this is a very important book about qualified police immunity. I know our team in Illinois this past couple of weeks worked really hard to get qualified immunity ousted in Illinois. Looks like that fight is going to have to continue for another year, but a very important book tonight that would love for you to buy, support Ben's work, and support the work of all the panelists tonight. We have a deep and powerful conversation coming up about criminal justice reform, and want to make sure we are all in this together, building movements across the country. And I'm seeing we're going to go live here in 1 minute. I see Leah in California, Rita there in DC. Hey, Rita, make sure you go out to the ProAct event on Saturday over in Arlington. I see Diana from Lee Summit, Missouri, outside of Kansas City. I see Eva in Milwaukee, Pierre in Yonkers. Great to see some New Yorkers on the call. Again, coast to coast, east to west, north to south, we have a massive movement at Our Revolution. I see Harvey from Ann Arbor. We're going to see Harvey's district attorney here in just a little bit. Elly Savant is going to be joining us. Got Judy in Mount Rainier, Maryland. And I see Jake, my good friend Jake, out in Oakland. And Orange County in the house, where we have a great group, Gilda Johnson. So again, make sure you buy the book tonight, become a movement builder, get 30% off. We're building a mass movement. And now I'm going to hand off the virtual microphone. I'm going to go up the road to my good friend Jordan Geiger up in South Bend, Indiana.
Hey, thanks so much, Mike. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our weekly National Organize to Win call. As Mike said, my name is Jordan Geiger, and I'm an Our Revolution National Board member and a BLM activist here in South Bend. Tonight, I'll be co-hosting with Marta, and we'll be covering some very important and timely topics tonight. As most of you know, across the nation, Our Revolution has been carrying out our 5-point plan to win on criminal justice reform, and that's the focus of tonight's call. One, mobilizing our national network of local Our Revolution groups from coast to coast to take action. 2, holding our elected officials accountable to support justice and policing. 3, electing progressive champions who will fight to end systemic racism in our criminal justice system. 4, fighting for policies like ending qualified immunity and cash bail. Restricting use of force, a big issue here in South Bend, and other needed reforms. And also 5th, pushing the Democratic Party to adopt a progressive platform of justice and policing and electing more of our members to party positions. I'm going to turn it over to Marta now.
Thank you so much, Jordan. Great to be on the call with an impressive lineup of guests. Our lineup tonight includes Philadelphia District Attorney Larry Krasner, whose election in 2017 was a defining moment for our movement. We also have former Bernie 2020 co-chair and co-founder of Ben & Jerry's, Ben Cohen, who just wrote a book, as Mike mentioned, on qualified immunity. And we have got a special promo code for you, so stay tuned for that. We also have Elly Savant, Ann Arbor, Michigan's prosecuting attorney, who's been in office just 4 months, but has already enacted major reforms in Washtenaw County. And we have Pamela Price, a progressive champion running to be the next DA of Alameda County, California. And we also have Monique Morale from Florida.
All right, a very exciting lineup. Thanks so much for that overview, Marta. Before we begin, let's take a moment to reflect on the George Floyd case. While we are relieved that the jury returned 3 guilty verdicts for his murder at the hands of police, we know that the fight to defeat systemic racism and win real criminal justice reform must continue. Minnesota Attorney General and Our Revolution board member Keith Ellison, who's the lead prosecutor in the case, acknowledged that the guilty verdicts were only the first step. He said specifically that I would not call the verdict justice because justice implies true restoration. It is accountability, which is the first step towards justice. True justice is not one case. It is a social transformation that says that nobody is beneath the law and no one is above it. And those are really important words that we all need to hold on to.
That's right, Jordan. And Our Revolution is committed to working for that transformative change at every level. In Congress, supported passage of the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act, which bans police from using chokeholds and no-knock warrants, the Breathe Act, and the Ending Qualified Immunity Act to make it easier to hold police officers accountable. At the state level, our members helped pass sweeping police reform legislation in Maryland and Illinois this year. And at the local level, we have helped elect progressive prosecutors across the country who are committed to changing the system.
Yeah, so all of this is happening in the light of George Floyd's murder. And the attorney for George Floyd's family called the guilty verdict a turning point for police accountability. A question that's been raised is will this verdict change policing in America? We know that mistrust of law enforcement is at an all-time high right now. So how do we restore the public's trust and ensure that bad cops are held accountable for their misconduct? So that's a question that we're going to be exploring. So our first guest tonight is Larry Krasner, District Attorney of Philadelphia. Our Revolution endorsed Larry when he ran for DA in 2017 on a platform of criminal justice reform. In his 3+ years in office, he's made a number of very important reforms, including creating a database of police misconduct that tracks officers who have forged evidence, coerced confessions, abused power, made racist remarks, and he's enforced a policy of not accepting testimony from those officers. So I want to thank District Attorney Krasner for being here tonight. And I'm wondering, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your work as DA?
Larry, I think you're muted.
District Attorney Krasner's not on yet.
Oh, I'm sorry.
He is here. He's in. Let me see if someone needs to promote him. He's in the attendees.
I just promoted a Larry Krasner, but I also think that we have a Larry Krasner in Vermont, not the Larry Krasner in PA. So I'm not sure if that's the same Larry Krasner.
let's move on to our next guest then. So,
Okay. All right. Sorry about that. Well, we all know that electing progressive champions and decision makers committed to reform, from city councilors, county sheriffs, prosecutors, and attorney generals to members of Congress, is one way that we change the system. Our revolution has worked to elect a very deep bench of criminal justice reform champions nationwide who have pledged to address the injustices in our system, including ending cash bail, reducing prosecution of low-level offenses, favoring diversion programs over jail time, and using a data-driven restorative justice approach to reconciliation. Now, Marta will introduce our next speaker.
All right, thank you so much, Jordan. So excited to have Pamela Price on the call.
I'm sorry, Marta, we're a little bit early for Larry Krasner, who's going to join us here in a couple of minutes. So let's talk a little bit about the book and about what we're up to. We'll give Larry a couple of minutes to show up. We're going to this call pretty quick tonight. Let's talk about Ben's book for a second before Larry shows up here in a couple of minutes.
Sounds good to me. As Mike mentioned, Ben Cohen wrote a book. It's called Above the Law. And all of our Movement Builder, our Revolution members get a 30% discount to that book. The link is going to be in the chat for you. Also, if you are not a member yet, please make sure to sign up and we will follow up with you once you sign up to become a member. Also, if you're on the phones, you can press *3 and we will sign you up. The book again is called Above the Law: How Qualified Immunity Protects Violent Police. Put a link to the website as well in the chat for you.
And I think that's, hey, Ben, I think we're going to be a little bit early, but Ben, do you want to just talk about the book for a couple minutes before we come right back to you later in the call?
You're muted, Ben.
How's this?
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, so after the murder of George Floyd, Jerry and myself, along with millions and millions of Americans, had enough. It was the straw that broke the camel's back. And we said that we're going to focus on holding cops accountable. And the way that we are focused on doing that is to end this absurd legal construct called qualified immunity. And we are working on it on the federal level and at the state levels. And right now, this is a moment when we can actually get rid of this absurd legal doctrine and finally hold cops individually accountable for abusing and brutalizing unarmed Black people. We formed a coalition of 16 national organizations, from the ACLU and the NAACP Legal Defense Fund to Americans for Prosperity. That's the Koch brothers organization, and the Cato Institute. So it's amazing to me that the people from the left and the right are all united in working for justice. Right now, the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act is working its way through Congress. And the one thing that cops and Republicans are digging their heels in is holding cops accountable. They are resisting the idea of getting rid of this qualified immunity. And what it essentially means, qualified immunity, I mean, it's a crazy couple of words, is that cops are immune from civil prosecution. I'm a regular person. If I haul off and assault somebody, that person can sue me But if it is a cop who hauls off and assaults somebody, they can't be sued. Qualified immunity is a get out of jail free card for bad cops. The cops realize that they're under attack. They're on the defensive right now. They know that there's reform legislation coming down the pike, but what they are dead set against is holding bad cops accountable, and they're doing everything they can to stop it. I can tell you as a business guy, if you don't have accountability, you ain't got nothing. I mean, if you tell your employees that they have to perform a particular task in a particular way, but when they don't, if you don't hold them accountable, it doesn't mean anything. And that's what's going on now with cops. So they're saying, oh, sure, we'll do training, we'll do body cameras, we'll do whatever. But as long as you don't hold us accountable when we disregard that stuff, we'll deal with it. So we need to dig in and we need to stick up for this provision, which is the keystone of the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. For regular people, if you do something and then you say, well, I didn't understand what the law was, they tell you ignorance of the law is no excuse. But for cops, it's not the case. I mean, cops, otherwise known as law enforcement officers, are not supposed to know the law. That's the theory behind qualified immunity. And so what qualified immunity says is that, well, we don't expect them to know the law, but unless some other cop in the past has committed exactly the same offense in exactly the same jurisdiction, then we expect the cop to understand that that action is not legal. And, but in practice, the way this works out is that there is never exactly the same situation. So there was this case where a suspect had surrendered and he was kneeling on the ground with his hands up, and a cop sicked his attack dog on that guy, sending him to the hospital. So the Institute for Justice found out about this, and they said, wow, we've got a case in that same jurisdiction where another cop had previously sicked his attack dog on a guy, and that cop was convicted. So yeah, we've got a good chance of overcoming the qualified immunity defense. But what happened was when they took it to court, the judge ruled that in this case, the guy had kneeled with his hands up, and in the previous case, the guy had surrendered by lying down. And because the two cases were not exactly the same, the cop got off by invoking qualified immunity. So, obviously, this is absurd. The interesting or the perverse irony of qualified immunity is that here's how it came about. After the Civil War in 1871, there was Reconstruction, but there was a problem that cops were still members of the Ku Klux Klan, and they were brutalizing and discriminating against Black people. So Congress, the US Congress, passed a law saying that if your constitutional rights or your civil rights are violated by a public employee like a cop, you can sue that cop. And, that worked for a long time. And then in the 1960s, during the civil rights movement, the Supreme Court interpreted that law to mean that what it currently means today, that no, you cannot sue a cop for violating your constitutional or civil rights. So, you know, it's true that Black people are bearing the brunt of this, but this is a white problem. White people hold the power in this country. And the people that we arm and pay to protect and serve are killing Black people in front of our very eyes, and we're letting them get away with it. Well, tonight, that stops. And I hope that you will all go to the holdcopsaccountable.org website and, you know, just put your name in the space for the email, and then we will let you know when we need your voice in terms of calling your representative, either in the US Congress or in your state houses, when we need letters of the editor with our whoop-de-doo letter to the editor machine, 1, 2, 3, it makes it happen, we send it for you. You know, for people who want to do op-eds, we have that available as well. But the important thing, I guess the important message that I want to leave you with is that the time is now. This is the moment. This law, the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, is moving through Congress as we speak. And it's being held up by Republicans in the Senate. And we need Democrats to stand strong, and we need Republicans to hear from their constituents that, along with Americans for Prosperity and Cato, we want to get rid of this unjust law. I mean, the only people that it helps is bad cops. We know that most cops are good cops. You know, we also know that it's a perverted culture in most police departments, but the only people who benefit from qualified immunity are bad cops. You know, you talk to police guys, and I've been talking to a bunch of police guys, what they say is the thing that good cops want most is to get bad cops off the force. Qualified immunity is a means to that end.
And tell us a little bit, thank you, Ben. Tell us a little bit about what state legislature is doing in different states to move ending qualified immunity forward in different states.
On the state level? Yeah. Well, as you know, the first state to overturn qualified immunity was Colorado. And then New York City overturned qualified immunity. And most recently, New Mexico has overturned qualified immunity. There's efforts going on in many states. There's a robust effort happening in California. I think you mentioned Illinois. I think there's another state, Wisconsin, that's currently working on it. You know, we did make a major effort in Maryland to overturn qualified immunity. We were not successful, I think, mostly because, you know, the legislator who sponsored the bill in Maryland did not really, you know, play the political game correctly. But, you know, Maryland did pass a history-making criminal justice reform bill. And we're going back to Maryland next session. The interesting thing about the Maryland law to overturn qualified immunity. You know, what the cops say is that, well, geez, I mean, if we're going to be liable, you know, we're going to lose our houses if we, you know, if we violate the law and, you know, you know, abuse people. And so, you know, Colorado dealt with that by placing a ceiling of $25,000 on what would come out of the cop's pocket. But what Maryland was proposing in their law was that the judgment against a guilty cop would be paid from the cop's pension, that instead of the pension going to the cop, it would go to the victim, which I think makes a tremendous amount of sense. We were working with mothers of children who had been severely beaten and left permanently damaged, or mothers of children who had been killed at the hands of the police. And the mothers were saying, if they know they're going to lose their pension, if they brutalize, they're going to think twice. And I think that's really true.
All right. Thank you so much, Ben. Everyone, as you have heard, Ben has a book, Above the Law. You can sign up to become a member in the chat and you'll get 30% off. Or if you are already a Movement Builder Our Revolution member, you will get the 30% off to Ben Cohen's new book, Above the Law, which makes it clear, as he explained, why we need to work to end qualified immunity. The link both to sign up and to become a member is going to be in the chat for you. And if you're on the phones, you can press *3 and we will sign you up to become a member and get 30% off the book. Thank you so much, Ben. Jordan, back to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm definitely going to have to get a copy of that. And I believe now we have District Attorney Krasner on the line. Are you here with us?
I am. Hi, Jordan.
Okay. Hey, how you doing? Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
All right. So I'm glad you could join us tonight. I wanted to know, I spoke a little bit about you before you got on, but I was hoping that you could share a little bit about yourself and talk a little bit about what you've done in your first term as DA.
Sure. So I was a criminal defense and civil rights lawyer for 30 years before I'd had enough. And I ran for DA in 2017. Lo and behold, very unlikely campaign. Succeeded, not because of me, but because of, well, you and a whole lot of other organizations and a whole lot of activists and a whole lot of super voters who came together. There was a magnificent handholding of 60-year-old African-American women and millennials and activists and a whole lot of people who get stepped on, because, I mean, the truth is most people do get stepped on one way or another. And we won. And we won with more votes than any DA in at least the last 20 years, promising all kinds of things that candidates for DA didn't promise. So, for example, we said we were going to try to do something about mass incarceration in the most incarcerated big city in the U.S. The future years of incarceration coming out of the Philadelphia courts have been cut in half. And I mean, as of right before the pandemic. Statistics don't count during the pandemic because the courts were shut down. But before the pandemic, we cut them in half in 3 short years. This was also the most over-supervised city of the 10 biggest cities, meaning too many people on probation and parole for too long. And we cut the future years of supervision by 2/3. It was a place where there were way too many juveniles who had been sent to snake pit. I mean, you might call them schools, but they're really more like prisons for kids. These snake pit facilities all over the state that cost a fortune and were utterly failing. There were over 600 Philadelphia juveniles in those places when we came into office. That number has been reduced by 80%. We are now down to a little bit over 100. We said we were going to try to fix the mistakes of the past. We have exonerated 18 people in 19 cases so far. The good news is that every one of those has been signed off by a judge. The bad news is that that's the kind of DA's administration we had in Philadelphia for a very long time, and they are not the only innocent people sitting in jail. And by the way, The innocent people who sat in jail for a rape murder they never committed took the place of the guilty person because the investigation was closed and they never actually went after the person who really did it. So we're pretty proud of that. We said we would protect immigrants, broke a 10-year contract with ICE that had existed to facilitate deportations with the vote of the mayor and my vote. And we also set up a first ever unit to protect immigrants as victims, as witnesses, and also to treat them fairly and even-handedly as defendants. We did something similar for workers who often have crimes committed against them by their employers. First ever unit to protect workers from crimes committed by their employers, which brought its first indictment, 37 felony counts for stealing $110,000 from hardworking people and then saying, whoops, bankrupt. You steal food from a convenience store, you get busted. It seems to me if you steal $110,000, you can't just drive off in your Range Rover and say, whoops, I went bankrupt. So, those are some of the things that we've done. We've also done some pretty revolutionary things for victims, and we're very proud of that. But just so we're clear, what's really happening here is not that there's anything so extraordinary about me or some of the great progressive prosecutors who got there before me or after me, including, Kim Fox, Aramis Ayala, Rachel Rollins. What's really going on is that this is what people want. And we just happen to have the toolkit because we are prosecutors, or we were defense lawyers or civil rights lawyers. We got the toolkit to do what the people want. So that's what's going on. And I will always be grateful for our revolution and everything you did to support us the first time.
Thank you. That's truly transformative work. And I'm so glad that you were willing to share all of that with us. It's pretty exhaustive. I'm wondering, I want to pick your brain here a little bit. So the Chauvin verdict was a rare murder conviction for a police officer in an on-duty incident. Only the 8 times since 2005 that a police officer was found guilty of a murder on the job, the conviction rate for use of force by a police officer killing an unarmed civilian is only about 35%. So in your mind, I'm curious, does this verdict give prosecutors more confidence to bring cases against police? And does it work to break down the blue wall of silence among officers?
I think the answer to both of those things is yes, but I think it's worth looking at the details for a minute. So, I was a very busy trial lawyer as a criminal defense lawyer. I did a lot of homicides. I tried cases all the time. And I also was a civil rights lawyer who specialized in lawsuits against police. In Philadelphia, there was absolutely no accountability coming from any kind of prosecutor's office when police did occasionally some pretty terrible things. And so, in a sense, those of us who sued them under Section 1983 were the only accountability that there was. But I saw something in this trial that I think is very important. One thing, and this is obvious, is the incredible value of video. This might be the most compelling video I've ever seen in a homicide case, and it's important to remember that. But what to me was sort of transformative and really important was to see the chief of police testifying against one of his own. That doesn't happen. And it also doesn't happen that other law enforcement people, be they EMTs or other police officers, testify against a fellow officer. This has always been a circling of the wagons. And it is my hope that some of these other police commissioners will now be shamed. They will be embarrassed away from trying to hide in the corner, that they will be placed in a situation politically where some prosecutors will have the guts to put them on the stand, even if they don't want to be there. Because the country is expecting more of police commissioners now. They are expecting them to stick up for justice, not to just circle the wagon, as if anything and everything a police officer does is okay. So to me, that was a very, very important moment when, I guess it was Chief Arredondo, I hope I pronounced that right, testified. Of course, he comes from his own background of filing a civil rights suit as a Black officer. He comes from his own background of having been in internal affairs, a unit that exists to investigate police from within, right? So he has a background that's pretty significant, but I thought it was admirable the way he did that. And I think it is a roadmap for other prosecutors in the future. They're going to need cooperation from city government. They're going to need cooperation from other people. But I think what he did perhaps made that more likely.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I just want to ask one last question of you. there've been calls among, activist groups, BLM in particular, calling for a defunding of the police. What's been put forward is the Breathe Act, and our revolution certainly supports that. In your mind, do you feel that this reform will be enough? I know that there have been allegations made that you and other reformers like yourself are to blame for rising crime rates, and activists such as myself are arguing that in order to address those violent crimes, we need to be investing more in the community. So, do you think that that reform is enough? That's a loaded question.
Do I think reform is enough? Not the kind of reform I'm looking for. Well, let me try that again. Yes, the kind of reform I am looking for. I view this as a movement. I've always viewed it as a movement, a people-led movement, a grassroots movement. And in my experience of 25 years, my professional hobby of defending protesters who were arrested and prosecuted by the Philly DA's office, because that is what the Philly DA's office liked to do to nonviolent people who are trying to change the world in good ways. What I figured out is most of these really important social justice movements have an arc of about 30 years. And then at 30 years or so, they win a huge battle. And then they have to go on and fight again, but they win a huge battle. So for example, if you look at something like, a chunk of the history of the Black civil rights movement, if you look at same-sex marriage, if you look at these things, you see this arc of about 30 years. I believe criminal justice reform is at about year 10, maybe 11. We'll give Michelle Alexander credit and say we started counting from that book, right?
Right.
Yeah. Got 19 more years to go. I mean, if anybody really thought that the dismantling of mass incarceration achieved over literally hundreds of years, but more recently 40 to 50 years, was going to be accomplished in 3 years, come on now. I mean, let's get real. Well, yes, we do need to shrink the footprint of law enforcement. We do need to move funding from police, from prosecutors' offices, from probation departments to things that actually prevent crime. But that's what a lot of us progressive prosecutors are talking about. We are specifically advocating for models in which you take tens or hundreds of millions of dollars and you put them into public schools, into treatment, into community-based organizations, into cure violence, into things of that sort. We're specifically advocating for that. And it ain't that hard to do. The police budget in Philly has increased $125 million in the last 4 years. We're all yelling, give me $100 million for this. You already spent it. You can find it. We're not talking about anything that is really undoable. And there are good models around the country of programs that have worked when there was a consistent investment in community-based organizations over a period of years, and you saw declining crime coupled with declining incarceration. It absolutely can be done. As for the ridiculous suggestion that a bunch of progressive prosecutors caused this, I mean, it's just completely unscientific. Of the 34 cities that have been examined, these are large cities for their stats. The bottom line is crime down across the country a bit, even violent crime down across the country a bit, a terrible spike in gun violence all over the country. The average increase last year was 40%. Last year was the year when there were more homicides than any other year in United States history, believe it or not. And what we see nationally is an 18% increase, in big cities, an average of a 40% increase. But more to the point, look at all 34 of those cities. Look at the cities with 108% increases, 85% increases, 62% increases. Some are Republican, some are Democrat. Some have traditional prosecutors, some have progressive prosecutors. The one thread, the commonality that we have has nothing to do with this cheap politics of let's blame the progressive prosecutors. The commonality is that every one of those places, and also the cornfields, experienced much of this. Closed high school classrooms, closed organized sports, both in and out of school, closed houses of worship, closed summer jobs, closed jobs in a low dollar economy, closed after school programs. You know where I'm going with this. Basically, absolutely everything that is basic in our fabric of society and protective of young people went away. So young people are killing young people. That's the reality of what's happening here. And at the same time, you had all kinds of new impediments to law enforcement functioning normally. As society opens up, and it is starting to open up, we are going to see reductions coming. But I hope to God we come out of this with the lesson we should have, because that lesson sure as hell isn't build more jails and hire more cops. That lesson is very clearly that we need to put our money back into all those things, the rec centers, the swimming pools, everything I mentioned. And we need to put more money back into everything I mentioned. And you need to get your school counselors back into school because they're gone in Philly. You need to get your school nurses back into school because they're gone. You need your class size in your public schools down from 35 to 21 or something like that, because in Philly, it's getting close to 35. That is where your money has to go, because we just saw how much damage it does when that money goes away. That is what we just saw. This is a lesson in how investing in prevention is the way to go. And yes, the people who are against it are going to make this silly, cheap politics of trying to go exactly the opposite direction as they always do. This is the one thing I will say this, and then I'll be quiet, Jordan, I promise. But this is the one thing I love about hang 'em high conservatives. When crime is going down, what do they say? They say, hang 'em high, it worked. When crime is going up, what do they say? Hang 'em high, crime is going up. They have the best tautology going in politics. No matter what's happening, whatever they did is right. And when progressive prosecutors are in there, if anything's going wrong, they caused it. Come on now. We all know better than this.
Well, District Attorney Krasner, I can feel your passion, and I'm sure I'm not alone in that. And I deeply appreciate your commitment to justice. And as a member of Our Revolution's political committee, I'm proud to announce that Our Revolution is again endorsing Larry Krasner as he seeks re-election. The Philadelphia primary, for those of you who don't know, is May 18th, and we'll be phone banking on Sundays from noon to 2 p.m. to re-elect District Attorney Larry Krasner. So please be sure to join us. Now, in the spirit of electing progressive champions, I'm going to turn it back over to Anna Marta so she can introduce our next guest.
Thank you so much, Jordan, and such an exciting endorsement for Larry Krasner. Congratulations. Back to our next guest, Pamela Price is here with us today, and she's a civil rights attorney in Oakland, California. She has spent her entire legal career fighting for justice on behalf of women, workers, low-income people, and communities of color. She's running for Alameda County District Attorney, as Larry Krasner said, to fix the stuff that's going on the inside that's hard to fix from the outside. She is going to be our next criminal justice reform champion. Welcome to the call, Pamela. Pamela, are you here?
I am here. Thank
Awesome.
you so much. Yes, thank you. I'm here and I'm excited to be with you all and with dear Larry. Hey, Larry, it's wonderful to see you, and to hear him is just amazing. He was the beacon light for us in 2018. So
Pamela,
thank you.
For those who don't live in California, let us know a little bit about you.
Sure. I am a civil rights lawyer. I'm running for Alameda County District Attorney because I'm a drum major for justice. For 30 years, I have been fighting for civil rights, having a great legal career, successfully arguing against racial harassment in the United States Supreme Court and creating new laws to stop sexual harassment in both education and employment. I'm a survivor of the Ohio juvenile justice and foster care system. I got arrested in my first demonstration in 1970 when I was 13 years old, and I've been fighting ever since. I literally made it from the streets of Cincinnati, Ohio to the United States Supreme Court by the grace of God. And I got a great education at Yale College, and then I came to California to go to law school, and I've been here ever since. I've been living in Alameda County, and this is supposedly our most woke place, but I'm a survivor of the Alameda County criminal justice system as well. And so I was asked to run for district attorney in 2017, and we've been fighting ever since.
That's impressive. Pamela, let us know a little bit about the Justice Done Right slate on which you are running on.
Sure. Justice Done Right is one of our slogans. The lead slogan is Justice with Compassion, because we recognize that for too long, prosecutors have been at the heart of mass incarceration, and there's been no real concern for either people who have been the victim of crime and certainly people who have been accused of crime. And so we know that in Alameda County, there's been a perversion of justice. The racial disparities that have infected our system are off the charts. And so when we talk about justice done right, we want to address the racial disparities. We want to hold bad cops accountable for the bad things that they do. And we want to reflect, this district attorney's office should reflect the will of the people of Alameda County, which is, you know, far more progressive than many places in the country, and we can do better. Certainly the DA's office can do better. We established Justice Done Right. We launched in January along with a progressive candidate for Alameda County Sheriff, Officer Joanne Walker. And we're optimistic that the two of us together, once we get there, can really turn this ship around.
That's right. Pamela, so tell us a little bit about the 10-point platform as well that you rolled out.
Sure.
What are the highlights?
Yeah, of course. You know, I've been here for 40 years. I love Oakland. And before I came here, growing up, Oakland and the Black Panther Party and the 10-point platform was an inspiring, feature of our movement. And so we adopted a 10-point platform that will address police accountability, that includes restorative justice, that includes reentry, which we desperately need, a systematic, programmatic process for people returning citizens in Alameda County. We have over-incarcerated and over-criminalized so many people. And so our platform also speaks to the epidemic of gun violence that Larry so compellingly described. We're experiencing it not just in Oakland, but across Alameda County. And so we know that we've got to be very aggressive to address gun violence in a way that does not over-criminalize Black and brown boys, which is what the current regime and the current methodology has been. So those are some of the highlights.
Great. Thank you for that recap. And what are some clear ways our Revolution California volunteers and organizers can help your campaign?
Sure. We always need volunteers, right? And as we're still in the midst of COVID and coming through it, we can't really go door to door, but we are going to farmers markets and we are engaging with people. We are doing literature drops. We are doing a lot of phone banking for fundraising. That's the main thing right now, because when I ran in 2018, which was the first time anyone in Alameda County in 53 years had challenged a sitting district attorney, the police unions from around the state came here and spent $1.5 million to stop us. So we are on a mission to raise enough money that we can be prepared for that onslaught, because we know it's coming. They will come here because they do not want to give up. They don't want to lose this seat. Our district attorney is the president, or was the president of the California District Attorneys Association, a statewide body that has been leading the opposition to criminal justice reform. And so when she put out the call, they came here, and the sheriff and every law enforcement agency and organization came here to support her. And we know they're coming back. So we need OR people to come and help us walk, help us talk, and help us raise the money we're going to need to fight this fight.
Thank you so much, Pamela, and we will be there for you. We will support you. With that, Jordan, take it over to introduce our next guest. And thank you so much, Pamela.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Be sure to get involved, y'all. So today, many activists like myself are grappling with the question of how do we reform an inherently racist, biased, and unjust criminal justice system and make it more equitable while protecting public safety, right? We're talking a lot about how to reimagine public safety. We're joined tonight by Elly Savant, who is the prosecuting attorney of Washtenaw County, Michigan. When he ran last November, he was endorsed by Bernie Sanders and our revolution. He clerked for Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg and led criminal justice reform work as a senior legal counsel for the city of Detroit. Elly said, "I ran because I thought that the prosecutor's office in the justice system more broadly was perpetuating injustice. And since the day he was sworn in, he's been bringing transformative justice to his county. In his first 2 months in office, he put forward critical reforms. On his first day in office, he rescinded the zero tolerance policies favoring drugs treatment and rehab over jail time. On day 3, He ended cash bail, being the first county in the state of Michigan to do so. On January 14th, he came out against prosecuting consensual sex work. And on MLK Day, he declined to charge in pretext stops. So I was hoping, Attorney Savit, could you say a little bit about yourself and explain what are exactly pretext stops?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's great to be here. And thanks again to Our Revolution for their support in our campaign. And it's just wonderful always being here with like-minded, progressive candidates and district attorneys from across the country. Like many of them, I didn't come from a traditional prosecutorial background. I actually started my career as an 8th grade U.S. history teacher in the New York City public schools, where I saw the kids in my classroom and their families and how the justice system for so many of them had cascading intergenerational effects. Families being held, a parent being held on cash bail, which can disrupt their children's learning experience. Parents that for nonviolent offenses were serving jail or prison time. And I saw the effects of that on the kids in my classroom. I went to law school, as mentioned. I worked for Justice Ginsburg on the Supreme Court. I came back to the city of Detroit, and really what I saw was day in and day out how the cascading effects of our criminal legal system were holding people back, not just the time they spent in jail or in prison, but the lasting stigma of a criminal record, making it difficult for people to obtain jobs, to obtain housing, to continue their education. The very things, quite frankly, that we need in order to prevent recidivism, in order to get people back on the right track. We prevent people from accessing when they have a criminal record. And we all know, and Michelle Alexander made this point brilliantly in her book, The New Jim Crow. We all know that in a system, in a country where we incarcerate more people than any country on the face of the planet, and Black people are around 6 times more likely to bear the brunt of that, we know that those lifelong consequences are functionally the new Jim Crow. So let's talk about pretext stops for a second. And I think it's particularly important now because, of course, we saw the George Floyd verdict, but just about a week before, we saw another Black man killed in Minnesota named Daunte Wright. And I think the stop of Daunte Wright is a classic example of a pretext stop. Daunte Wright was pulled over because he had an air freshener dangling off the back mirror of his car. Now, let me tell you this. When police officers pull people over for minor traffic infractions like that, a lot of times they don't care about the air freshener itself. They don't care that you were driving a little bit too long in the passing lane. They don't care that you were going 5 miles over the speed limit. What they are doing is effectuating those stops for the purpose of gaining consent to search your car and go on a fishing expedition for contraband, drugs, and other stuff. And they don't need any sort of justification for that if they can stop you and you give your consent. They don't have to have any suspicion that you were actually engaged in criminal activity. All they got to do is be able to pull somebody over for any reason, any observed traffic violation, and then they can go on a fishing expedition if you give consent, and they could search your car. Now, we all know, and there's been multiple national studies that prove this, Black people and people of color are disproportionately likely to be singled out for pretext stops. This is what driving while Black is. This is what racial profiling is. And not only can it lead to death, lead to a police killing like it did in the case of Daunte Wright, in the many cases where it doesn't lead to that, it still imposes significant dignitary harm. The embarrassment, the humiliation of knowing that you've been stopped, not for a traffic violation, not because the officer is interested in giving you a ticket, but because of the color of your skin, the officer is interested in looking for something more. It's harmful to the relationship between police and our communities. It leads to people dying. It makes police stops much more tense, and it is not necessary to ensure public safety. So on Martin Luther King Day, what we said is this. We're the prosecutor's office. Simply put, don't bring us these contraband charges that arise from pretext stops. If we see a police report that has that type of fact pattern in it, pulled over for a minor traffic violation. Officer says, you wouldn't mind if I looked around your car a little bit, and they find some drugs, find some contraband. We're not bringing those charges. So we're trying to eliminate the incentive for police to go on these tremendously harmful fishing expeditions. And what I'll say too is this, I previewed this with our police leadership here in Washtenaw County, and unlike in a lot of places across the country, we have relatively progressive police leadership here in Washtenaw County. We do. And not only did they say, we don't have a problem with this, some of them said to me, not only are we supportive of this at a leadership level, but we want to know every time you decline a charge coming out of our jurisdiction that arises from this pretext stop. Because these types of stops, good cops know this, these types of stops are precisely the type of stops and precisely the type of treatment that build up mistrust in communities of color and make it nearly impossible for police to have any sort of credibility in the communities that they are sworn to serve. So that's what we're doing with pretext stops here in Washtenaw County. And we're simply sending a message. We are not going to bring any charges that have at their core this type of misbehavior that is rooted in racial profiling. Now, I'll say one more thing. I got a little bit of pushback on this from more traditional prosecutors who say, well, how are you possibly going to solve crimes if you don't engage in these types of pretext stops and racial profiling? And what I say is this, and to any district attorney or any legislature that might be thinking about doing this, I'd say this. The states of New Mexico and Washington already prohibit pretext stops in their state constitutions. And last time I checked, it's not as though no crimes are solved in Washington or New Mexico. It's not as though the sky has fallen there. We don't need these to keep our communities safe, but we know that they cause significant harm, which is why in Washtenaw County, we want no part in that.
Thank you for sharing. Just briefly, could you share, is there any local legislation that has moved around this?
So
your area, something I could look to for my community, to be honest with you.
Yeah. So look, this is actually something that can be done on a state and local level. One is the state legislatures could easily ban this. Again, New Mexico, Washington, it's prohibited in their state constitutions. But the other thing is, typically, look, if a sheriff is elected, if a prosecutor is elected, prosecutors can do what we did and say, we're not charging cases arising from them. Sheriffs can say, I'm directing my officers not to make them. We won't even refer any charges to the prosecutor's office, and they'll be subject to discipline if they engage in these types of pretext stops. And if your local sheriff, your local police chief is not elected, they likely answer to an elected city council or an elected county commission, which could easily give directive to say, don't engage in these types of pretext stops. That's a directive from your funding body. So there are a number of levers that we can pull if we want to take this nationwide. It doesn't need to be something that needs to pass the federal Congress. This can start right here at every local level.
All right. Well, I certainly, and I'm sure everyone else here, appreciate you being on the call tonight. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Anna Marta. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Elly. Thank you, Jordan. Our next guest is Monique Morale. She's last in our lineup, but she's one of our best criminal justice reformers out there, and she's in a tough state. So Monique, welcome to the call. You are the Orange, Osceola County, Florida State Attorney. You were endorsed by Bernie and Our Revolution, and you ran on a progressive criminal justice reform platform that included pursuing restorative justice wherever possible. Let us know a little bit about the past 4 months and what's going on in Florida.
Well, good evening, Our Revolution. It is so good to be back with you again. Whenever you call, I will answer. I might be a little late, but I will answer because I am just so appreciative of all the love and support that you all have shown me over the past year. And I want to make sure that we keep going and we keep pushing. I want to give a special shout out to Larry Krasner. I've been watching the PBS special documentary about him, and you are such an inspiration. And thank you so much for being one of the trailblazers to just kind of lead this progressive movement and give those of us who came behind you a blueprint of how to navigate this. So I just celebrated my first 100 days. And in that, I am super excited to announce that we have hit the ground running and have kind of done some things that are different and unusual. So let me tell you about them. We put together a COVID policy. When I took office, we were experiencing a COVID-19 outbreak in the Orange County Jail. And I put a policy out that told my prosecutors what they could and could not prosecute, how long they could send people to jail or prison for, and that if they were thinking of a term of prison or jail that was less than a year, then they needed to think of something else, an alternative to incarceration, because the research showed us that individuals who are incarcerated were twice as likely to die from COVID-19 and 4 times as likely to contract COVID-19. So it was really unreasonable for us to incarcerate individuals for nonviolent offenses, individuals who weren't a threat or a danger to our community. There was no purpose for them to be incarcerated. So within my first 30 days, I put out my community health and safety plan, which gave guidelines for my prosecutors on what they should do and how they should handle these cases, and to help us get through the COVID backlog to resolve as many cases at first appearances as possible, so as to not require people to return to court unnecessarily, exposing them to COVID in yet another setting, and to drop cases that really didn't make sense. Like Elly, I've said there are just certain things that we're just not going to focus our resources on. For me, marijuana charges were those things. I told my prosecutors, we have a lot of things that we need to focus on. Unfortunately, as DA Krasner mentioned, violent crime has gone up over this last year due to COVID, gun crime specifically. And we have a lot of it here in Central Florida. We're not immune. So I need to focus on that, and I can't waste time and resources chasing down people who are smoking weed. We've also implemented our officer-involved critical incident policy. And this took a little bit longer to do, but it was really important because we needed a method in which we could deal with police violence against the community. And one of the things that I've done is I've started prosecuting law enforcement officers who abuse their discretion and impose violence on our communities. One particular case that I can mention, because it's not currently an open case, is an officer who lied in a police report, accused an individual of battery on a law enforcement officer. That battery would be that she had an open container of juice in her hand and she was swinging her hand back and forward. But body cam showed that she did not throw the juice on him. In fact, when he told her, if you spill that juice on me, I'm going to drag your ass, and those were his words, so please excuse my harsh language, that she then took the cap and put it back on her juice so as to not provoke the wrath of the officer. And within moments, well, she said to him some words that upset him and insulted him, and he immediately ran after her, pulled her down a flight of stairs, and then charged her with resisting and battery on a law enforcement officer. So of course I dropped the charges against her, but I also charged him with battery because making a false report because he lied and he battered a citizen. And I need to let people know that we are not going to tolerate this type of behavior. A law enforcement officer's job is to protect and serve, and that we expect that they will in fact protect and serve. And there, unfortunately, are many situations like this that I'm not able to discuss because they're currently open cases. And I see my Central Florida people giving me shout outs. So, hey guys, so happy that you're here. But more to come on this, because we have to ensure the safety of our communities. And the safety of our communities means that we will keep our communities safe from law enforcement officers who are bad actors and abuse their discretion to wreak havoc on our communities.
Thank you so much, Monique. It's so great to see the chat lighting up with so many comments from our Revolution Florida organizers. We love you. We thank you for your brave work. We thank every guest who was here with us tonight with inspiring examples about addressing the injustices in our criminal justice system using a data-driven restorative justice approach. So thank you, Elly. Thank you, Monique, Pamela, Larry, and Ben. Today, we are going to just quickly go through in the remaining couple of minutes of the call, just a couple of calls to action. Today, as I said, we have a special hot deal of the presses for our movement builders. Sign up at the link below. We are giving you 30% off of Ben Cohen's new book, Above the Law, which makes it clear why we need to work to end qualified immunity. If you are not yet a movement builder, and I hope all of you are, you can sign up at the link below in the chat, and we will follow up with instructions on how to get this amazing deal. If you're on the phones, don't forget to press *3 and we will sign you up. So every week, as you all know, we have inspiring calls with great guests. I'm going to highlight just a few. Tomorrow, Our Revolution Ohio is holding their monthly meeting, which will feature a discussion on bail reform, and it includes special guest Nina Turner. She's always awesome, so tune into that. On Saturday at noon, join us in Virginia, Alexandria more specifically, or tune in to our live stream. We will rally for the PRO Act, and we will send a message to Virginia Senator Mark Warner, who is one of the infamous 3 Democrats who aren't on the bill, to become a co-sponsor. This is the most pro-union legislation since the 1930s, and we will need to get Senator Warner on board. So tune into the call, the live stream, or join us at the live event in Alexandria. Moving on to South Carolina, Saturday, May 8th, Revolution South Carolina will host a healthcare forum with renowned single-payer advocate Wendell Potter. He's great, so tune into that. Also joined by student activist Deanne Connor to discuss Medicare for All and how South Carolina's refusal to expand Medicaid hurts struggling South Carolinians, especially people of color. This was our call, everyone. Special thanks to our volunteers, to our amazing guests, to our members, and to everyone who signed up tonight to become a sustaining member or purchased a book. We cannot do this work without you. And now let's close our call with our usual chant, which is when we organize, we win, because we do. So unmute your microphone and say it with me. When we organize, we win. One more time. When we organize,
we will win.
Good night, everyone. Woo!
Good night.
Have a great night, y'all. Thank y'all for being here.
Of course. Thank you.